Hello and welcome to this video in which we will discuss product management. So the last one we talked about product concepts. This we're going to look at a couple of topics associated with product management. First thing we're going to look at after we talk a little bit about new product development is the new product development process. And then we will transition into a discussion of the product life cycle. And the reason I like to talk about these two topics with respect to product management is the product life cycle basically takes up where the new product development process leaves off. Okay, so again, first thing we're going to talk about is new product development, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the new product development process. But before we get there, we need to figure out what a new product is. And you might be sitting there scratching your head going, well, come on, Murphy. I mean, how hard can this be? And there's actually a lot of debate about what is meant by a new product. And we're going to take a really broad approach. We're going to say that a new product is something that's like revolutionary, and it can be something as simple as product modification. So, sometimes you see a product that says new and improved. There's a group of people, there's a group of marketers who would argue that that really is a new product. There were some people that would argue that a new product is something that represents a radical innovation, something that the world's never seen before. So that's a really, really narrow perspective. We're going to take a much broader perspective. All right. And the reason that new product development is important, or a reason, not the reason, but one reason that um, new product development is important is because new products are, essential for an organization's survival. And you say, boy, I'm glad I paid $700 a credit hour to learn that. Holy smokes. New products are essential to an organization's long-term viability. If you think about that, right, and just to give you an example, most of you were born, I'd say mid-90s, probably maybe mid to late 90s. Cell phones, excuse me, not cell phones, smartphones. Smartphones were first introduced in the mid-90s. And if you go back and look at what a smartphone in the mid-90s looked like and what its capabilities are versus what a smartphone today looks like and its capabilities today, you know, they're both called smartphones, but they're very, very different products, and what they can do and how quickly they can do it are much different. And the point that I'm trying to make is that, organizations that would still try to sell a smartphone as it appeared in 1995, right, if they were trying to do that in 2016, they'd get their butts handed to them. Okay, I mean, pardon the colorful expression. So, you could say the same thing about personal computers. I mean, if you think about the first personal computer you saw, back when you were a little kid, right, and compare them to what personal computers look like or what the popular personal computers look like today, there's a big, big difference, right? I was looking at the Sunday paper, and I saw an ad for a laptop, and it's now got, I think it has 1 terabyte capability or capacity with its hard drive. I mean, that's to me, that's mind-boggling. When considering when I got my first laptop, yeah, I don't even want to go there, quite honestly. So, and then a second thing is that a lot of new products are failures, and again, that's one of the reasons why it's important to define what you mean by a new product, because depending on how a new product is defined, that's going to impact the kind of the percentage of new products that are successful versus those that are failures. But if you just want to think about, if you want to think about, new product failures and things of that nature, just think about movies, right? Motion pictures, and the ones that come out and are quote unquote successful versus the ones that aren't so successful. And the key is that because a lot of new products are not successful, organizations have to have successful products and really profitable successful products to make up for the new products that aren't successful. Okay, so that's a brief overview of new product development. And we'll spend a little bit of time now looking at the new product development process. And the new product development process does not guarantee success. Just like the process that we talked about with marketing research doesn't guarantee success, but it reduces the opportunities for failure. Okay, it doesn't guarantee success, but it reduces the opportunities for failure, in part because the new product development process, at least the way that I present it, is really like a funnel. You start with a lot of stuff, and it continues to winnow, and hopefully by the time you get to the end, you've got products that are going to be, successful in the marketplace because you followed a rather detailed, process. Okay, so the first phase, or first step, first phase in the new product development process is idea generation. You got to come up with an idea, right? Organizations got to come up with ideas. And there's lots of ideas out there, and organizations can get them internally. A number of organizations, for example, have research and development departments. An organization can get them externally, right? Sometimes organizations talk to their customers and say, what are we doing what is there something that we could do that would be different, right? If you think about, potato chips. Potato chips are, not the most exciting product in the world, but if, I think I remember within the past 6 to 9 months, I think Lay's was sponsoring a competition for people to come up with new flavors for potato chips. That would be an example of external ideas. So first phase is idea generation. Second phase is what's known as idea screening. And this is where an organization takes a pretty detailed look at the ideas that it has generated in the first stage. And a pretty detailed, because some of these ideas just, they're just not going to pass the sniff test, like, oh my God, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard, kind of thing. And so again, this is part of the funnel. You start with, maybe you start with 15 ideas, and then when you take a closer look at those 15 ideas in the idea screening phase, maybe you winnow them down to, maybe 5 ideas. And what really savvy organizations do is they will periodically review some of the ideas that have been discarded in the idea screening phase, in part because things change, right? Macro environmental factors, economic conditions, technological conditions, political conditions, socio-cultural environment. Okay, so we talked about idea generation, we talked about idea screening. Next phase is concept testing, and this involves external validation. Difference between idea screening and concept testing, or one of the differences between idea screening and concept testing, is that idea screening is done internally to a firm, right? Firms just, its own employees are evaluating ideas. The concept testing is where you take the ideas that have survived the idea screening phase, and you go to a group of customers or prospective customers and say, okay, what do you think about this idea? Right? And sometimes what will happen is, customers are going, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard, right? The organization might not be real happy, but it's better that the organization finds that out early on rather than, taking the time and money to pursue an idea further. Kind of simultaneous, as subsequent to the concept testing, now you may have fewer ideas. Maybe once you've done the concept testing, the 5 ideas that survived the idea screening are now down to 3. And what organizations should do is they should do a business analysis of the remaining ideas, and that is basically a revenue projection, cost projection, profit projection situation. And this is oftentimes problematic because it's done by an organization, and organizations often have a vested interest in the product. In particular, certain individuals may have a vested interest in a particular idea. So what happens on a regular basis is that the potential revenues tend to be overstated, the potential costs tend to be understated, and if you think about it, higher revenues, lower cost, well, you end up with larger profits. So, oh boy, let's go do this idea. So there really needs to be kind of a critical eye put on those figures. And we see this on a regular basis. I mean, if you follow the motion picture or the movie industry, you'll see that a movie will debut, and somebody will say, boy, we thought we were going to do $50 million of business the first weekend, and we ended up with 15 million. How do you make, I mean, that's a pretty big difference. And again, it's the thing of, people start pushing, saying this is a great idea, this is a great idea, this is a great idea. And so you might get a kind of a false positive, right? Of you go ahead with an idea that maybe really isn't a good idea, if you had more realistic revenue and cost considerations. So once that's done, then you enter the product development phase, which is where a prototype or a model of the product is shown to prospective customers. So now you're coming up with stuff that's a little more tangible. We've really had up to the point of the business analysis is an idea, and an idea that hopefully has been vetted both internally and externally by a group of prospective customers. Product development, you have a prototype or a model that's developed, and then that's shown to customers for their for their feedback. And there's a lot of different ways that this could be done. I know I did in the 90s I did some work for Little Tikes, the toy company that's headquartered down in Hudson. And one of the things that they do is they will, when they're thinking of coming out with a new product, they at that time in the mid 90s, they had a daycare center on campus or at their headquarters, and they had a room where they would put new toys in. That were in the developmental stage, and they would watch as the little kids that were kids of employees would play with these new toys to get a sense for, think about this. Most toys are designed by adults. Adults don't think like kids, and so, adults think, well, this is the way this product's going to be used, and all of a sudden they find out that kids are like, maybe taking a plastic baseball bat, instead of using it as a baseball bat, they're smacking the other kids over the head with the baseball bat. It's like, man, we never saw that one coming. So the product development is where you have a prototype or model. And again, sometimes what organizations do is they don't follow this process. They kind of skip some of these stages, because you start to think about it, you say, well, idea generation takes time and costs money, and idea screening takes time and costs money, and concept testing and all this other stuff. This all takes time and costs money. It's like, man, if we got a great idea, let's just jump on and commercialize the idea. Which leads to the next step, which is test marketing. And test marketing can be really lengthy and can be really costly. And some organizations, decline to test market. And all test marketing refers to is, marketing the product in a realistic market situation. So you're going to put together the product, you're going to put it in places. So it's kind of like the 4Ps thing. Here's our product, here's what, here's, how we would price it, here's, where we would sell it, and things like that. And, and organizations kind of, examine kind of how the product performs, and then once the information is in on that, the organization makes the decision of whether it should commercialize the product or not, right? And the commercialization leads to the product launch or the introduction, which is the first phase of the product life cycle. And so again, what we have with the new product development process, again, we have a sequential kind of thing. But even when you get to the commercialization phase, right? If you say, yep, we're going to bring this product out, there's decisions that need to be made at that stage. Do you do a kind of an all-at-once introduction, or do you gradually introduce the product? And this example goes back a number of years, but when Coke came out with Diet Coke in the mid '80s, Coke basically targeted the 10 largest U.S. metro areas at the time, and so those were the ones that first received Diet Coke, and then after that, the Diet Coke was rolled out to other large markets. But what Coke was doing is it was using the 10 or the 10 largest markets. They were using that as a test market of sorts to get a sense for how it might tweak, right, the Diet Coke when it was being introduced on a more widespread basis. So we've talked about new product development process, and we left off at commercialization or product launch, and what that leads us to is what's known as the product life cycle, which refers to the phases that a product goes through from its beginning to its end. And one of the reasons that the product life cycle is an important idea is because that products are not managed the same way, or should not be managed the same way when when they're in different phases of the product life cycle, because certain things are more important at particular phases. So and this again is there's a lot of discrepancy on how many phases there are in the product life cycle. I don't really care, how many phases there are. I'm going to teach you 5. Some teach 4, some teach 6, right? It doesn't make any difference to me. The bottom line is that there's a product, it's introduced, the product has an ending, and in between there's stuff that goes on, and the idea is that in these different phases, an organization's approach to managing a particular product should not be the same from one phase to another. So the first phase is the introduction, or the product launch phase, commercialization, that we talked about. And one of the things that's really important in most situations is for organizations to make sure that they have a sufficient amount of product in stock. So I'm a logistics guy primarily. And so that means, you've got to make sure that your inventory is where it needs to be. You can't really, when you're bringing out a new product, you really can't afford to be out of stock of that product. So it might require an organization to spend more money transporting, right? Maybe they're doing some what's called expedited transportation, speeding up the transportation to make sure that you've got product on the shelves so that customers are able to purchase the product. Okay, so the introduction. The next phase is known as the growth phase, and this is where there's a rapid increase in sales volume. And so again, you're going to have to, as an organization, you're going to have to ramp up production. You're going to have to make sure that there's coordination between production and let's say logistics. You also may be expanding the number of places that the product is sold in. So there's a lot, potential coordination issues that occur at the growth stage, and again, there's a rapid increase in sales. The next phase is the maturity phase, and that's where sales begin to slow, and organizations are faced in the maturity phase with a lot more competition, because what happens is people see the growth phase, say, whoa, this is a pretty lucrative market. So other companies may jump into that particular market, and so then you have additional competitors. And if you think about it from an economic perspective, when you have more competitors in a market, that tends to have price considerations, right? The more competitors there are, the more price competition there tends to be in, for a particular product. And so at the maturity phase, organizations can do a number of different things to try to extend the maturity phase. So one thing that you might find at the maturity phase of the product life cycle is what's known as product modification. That's where you see a lot of the new and improved stuff. So if you think about the example that we talked about in the product mix with the laundry detergents, and specifically Tide. If you think about what Tide has done through the years, right? A few years ago, Tide came out with the Tide Pods, right? Is that a new product? Well, yeah, it's a new product, and it's responding to a variety of things. And so now the product line for Tide is even deeper than it was before, right? Another thing that can happen. So not only can in a maturity phase, not only might an organization choose to modify the product, an organization might choose to modify the market. So what an organization might do is, maybe if it's been really heavily domestic, right, an organization might look outside the country for potential sales. Or what an organization might do is it might look and say, okay, so people use this product a certain time of day. Could we convince people to use the product multiple times during the day? So, I know I can't remember how long ago it was, but the orange juice, the lobbying group for orange juice producers in this country basically had a slogan that orange juice isn't just for breakfast anymore. So what they were trying to do is they were trying to convince you, because orange juice is seen as basically a breakfast drink. They were saying, hey, it's okay to drink orange juice at times other than just breakfast. So that would be an example of market modification. And finally, you got the decline stage, and so the decline stage is where the absolute sales of a product tend to or start to decline, not surprisingly. And one of the things that marketers might do is they might do what's known as a milking or harvesting strategy, where they reduce the marketing support for a product, right? They keep the price the same, but they'll reduce the marketing support for it. So I think a really good example of that is if you think about personal computers, right? Desktops probably are in the decline phase of their product life cycle. And so while they're available for sale, you don't see a lot of the computer manufacturers really pushing people to buy desktops, right? So there's not a lot of promotional stuff to buy desktops. Much more emphasis on buying laptops and tablets. So, wow, I hit almost 21 minutes, so we will stop there and see you in the next lecture. Bye.